The afternoon sun filtered through the crystal chandeliers of Brilliance & Co., casting fractured rainbows across the pristine white marble floor. The jewelry store occupied a corner of the city's most exclusive shopping district, where every surface gleamed and every interaction was supposed to be wrapped in velvet courtesy. Maya Henderson stood before the display case, her reflection multiplying in the mirrors that lined the walls. She was a large woman, her dark skin luminous against the cream-colored blouse she'd chosen that morning, her natural hair pulled back in an elegant bun that had taken her 20 minutes to perfect. She'd dressed carefully for this visit, though she couldn't have articulated why she felt the need to prepare herself like armor. The emerald ring caught the light as she leaned closer to examine it. It was extraordinary. A Colombian emerald surrounded by diamonds, the kind of piece that whispered rather than shouted. Maya had always appreciated jewelry that carried weight beyond its price tag, pieces that told stories through their craftsmanship. Her grandmother had taught her that. Quality speaks in silence, she used to say. Maya's fingers hovered over the glass, not quite touching, respectful of the boundary between browsing and handling. She was calculating mentally. The cut, the clarity, the setting. Her trained eye caught details most customers would miss. The precision of the prong work, the graduated sizes of the accent stones, the way the metal had been worked to let maximum light reach the center stone. She didn't notice the sales associate approaching until the woman was already too close, invading the comfortable distance one usually maintains with strangers. The associate was young, perhaps 25, with blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail that swung as she moved. Her name tag read Stephanie, and her smile was the kind that didn't reach the eyes. "Can I help you find something?" Stephanie's tone carried an edge Maya recognized instantly. It was the voice people used when they were really asking a different question. "Should you even be here?" "I'm just browsing, thank you," Maya replied, her voice warm despite the coldness she felt radiating from the other woman. She'd learned long ago that politeness could sometimes disarm prejudice, though she held no illusions about its success rate. Stephanie didn't move away. Instead, she positioned herself between Maya and the display case, a human barrier wrapped in designer clothing and assumption. "These pieces are quite expensive. The emerald ring you're looking at is $48,000. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Maya felt it settle on her skin, that familiar sensation of being measured and found wanting based on nothing but appearance. She'd felt it in department stores, in restaurants, in the lobbies of hotels where she'd been staying. She'd felt it so many times that she'd developed a catalog of responses, from gentle education to cold dismissal, depending on her energy and the severity of the offense. Today, she simply nodded. "It's beautiful craftsmanship." "Yes, well, we require serious buyers for pieces in this range." Stephanie's smile had frozen into something harder now, less pretense of courtesy. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at our estate jewelry section? We have some lovely vintage pieces at more accessible price points." Maya felt the heat rising in her chest, that familiar cocktail of anger and hurt that never quite lost its potency no matter how many times she experienced it. But she'd learned patience. She'd learned that sometimes the most powerful response was simply to continue existing in spaces where people didn't think you belonged. "I appreciate the suggestion," Maya said evenly, "but I'm specifically interested in contemporary pieces today." She reached toward the display case again, intending to ask if she might examine the emerald ring more closely. Her hand was still several inches from the glass when Stephanie's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "Take your hands off that jewelry right now!" The volume was shocking in the hushed elegance of the store. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. The classical music playing softly through hidden speakers seemed to stutter and fade. Maya's hand froze in mid-air, her fingers still curved in the gesture of reaching. The small smile she'd been wearing, polite, patient, determined, died on her lips. For a moment, she couldn't move at all. The shock of being yelled at like a thief, like a child, like something less than human, had turned her body to stone. The silence that followed the shout was thick and suffocating. Maya became acutely aware of every eye in the store fixed on her. She could feel the weight of their judgment, the rapid calculations happening behind expensive sunglasses and designer handbags. She could see them deciding who she was in the space of a heartbeat, their assumptions settling like concrete. Stephanie stood with her arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the fabric of her blazer. There was no apology in her expression, no embarrassment at her outburst. Instead, her face carried the righteous certainty of someone who believed they had just prevented a crime. The store's security guard, a middle-aged black man whose name tag read Marcus, had taken several steps closer. Maya caught his eye for just a moment and saw something there. Recognition, perhaps, or sympathy. But he didn't speak. He was there to maintain order, and in this moment, order meant containing her, not protecting her. Maya slowly lowered her hand, her movements deliberate and careful. She was thinking about all the ways this moment could escalate, all the ways her very existence in this space could be weaponized against her. She thought about Trayvon Martin buying Skittles, about Christian Cooper birdwatching, about every ordinary moment that had been transformed into something dangerous simply because of skin color and assumption. "I was just looking," Maya said, and she hated the way her voice came out. Calm, measured, more polite than the situation deserved. But politeness was survival. Composure was armor. She'd learned that lesson too many times to forget it now. Stephanie's smile was cruel in its condescension. "This isn't the kind of place where people just look the way you were looking." The words landed like physical blows. Because this wasn't really about the jewelry, was it? It had never been about the jewelry. It was about who was allowed to desire beautiful things, who was trusted in spaces of luxury, who was assumed to belong, and who was assumed to be a threat. An elderly white couple near the front of the store whispered to each other, their gazes sliding between Maya and Stephanie. A younger woman in expensive athleisure wear pulled her Hermes bag closer to her body, an unconscious gesture that spoke volumes. Another customer, a man in a business suit, simply turned his attention back to the watches he'd been examining, a deliberate choice to not get involved. Maya felt the familiar weight settling onto her shoulders, the burden of representing not just herself, but every black woman who might walk into this store after her. She thought about walking away, about preserving her dignity by refusing to engage. But something in her resisted. Why should she leave? She had every right to be here. She had done nothing wrong. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and met Stephanie's hostile gaze directly. "I'd like to speak with the manager, please." "That won't be necessary," Stephanie said quickly, her tone suggesting that management was not about to side with Maya in this situation. "Actually," Maya said, her voice still calm but now carrying an edge of steel, "it will be very necessary." She stood her ground, aware that every second she remained in the store was an act of resistance. Her heart was pounding, adrenaline flooding her system with the ancient imperative to fight or flee. But she did neither. She simply stood there, a large black woman in a cream blouse and pearls, refusing to be moved. The other customers had stopped pretending not to watch. The store had become a stage, and Maya was trapped in a performance she'd never auditioned for. But if she had to be on display, she would at least control how she was seen. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She wouldn't confirm whatever stereotypes they were busy constructing in their minds. Stephanie shifted her weight, uncertainty flickering across her face for the first time. Perhaps she was beginning to realize that this situation wasn't resolving the way she'd expected. Perhaps she was calculating the optics of this scene, the potential for viral video, the liability of her actions. Maya waited, counting her breaths, feeling the weight of every eye in the store, carrying the weight of every black woman who had been treated as suspicious simply for existing in spaces of wealth. She waited, and she refused to leave. "I'll get Mr. Patterson," Stephanie finally said, her voice tight with displeasure. "Thank you," Maya replied, her courtesy now a deliberate choice rather than a reflex. "I'll wait right here." The minutes that followed felt suspended in amber, each second stretching into something elastic and strange. Maya remained standing in front of the display case, her hands now clasped in front of her, her posture perfect. She'd learned long ago that when you were black in spaces like this, your body language was constantly being read as evidence. Slouching was suspicious. Moving too quickly was threatening. Even standing still required a specific kind of performance. Relaxed enough to seem non-threatening, but upright enough to command respect. She could feel Stephanie hovering nearby, maintaining her guard position as though Maya might suddenly lunge for the jewelry at any moment. The security guard, Marcus, had stationed himself near the entrance, his face carefully neutral. Maya wondered what he was thinking, whether he'd experienced moments like this himself, whether he felt any solidarity, or if his loyalty belonged to his paycheck. The other customers had mostly returned to their browsing, though she caught surreptitious glances, quick assessments, people trying to piece together the narrative of what they'd just witnessed. A young woman with pink-tinted hair seemed to be recording something on her phone, though whether it was Maya or just the general drama, she couldn't tell. Maya used the waiting time to study the store more carefully. Brilliance & Co. was decorated in the modern minimalist style that had become ubiquitous among luxury retailers. Clean lines, sparse displays, an aesthetic that suggested exclusivity through absence rather than abundance. The walls were painted a soft gray that probably had some sophisticated name like morning mist or dove's breath. Recessed lighting created pools of illumination that made each piece of jewelry glow like a small sun. She recognized some of the designers represented here. There was a collection by Verdura in one case, their signature enamel work unmistakable. Another case held pieces by Jar, the reclusive Parisian jeweler whose work rarely appeared outside of auction houses and private collections. This wasn't just any jewelry store. This was a serious establishment, the kind of place that catered to serious collectors. The kind of place, Maya thought with a bitter internal laugh, where she should have been welcomed rather than vilified. The manager appeared from a door behind the main counter, moving with the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to handling problems. He was perhaps 50, with silver hair and a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His name tag identified him as David Patterson, manager. Stephanie intercepted him before he reached Maya, speaking in low, urgent tones. Maya couldn't hear the specifics, but she could imagine. Suspicious behavior, aggressive stance, refused to leave. The narrative being constructed, the story being told about her without her voice. Mr. Patterson's expression as he listened was professionally concerned, the kind of face people make when dealing with an unfortunate situation that needs to be managed rather than resolved. He nodded at whatever Stephanie was saying, his eyes flicking toward Maya with an assessment that felt clinical and cold. When he finally approached her, his smile was the trained kind, polite but impersonal. "I understand there's been some confusion. How can I help resolve this situation?" "There's been no confusion," Maya said, her voice clear and steady. "Your employee yelled at me and accused me of being a thief for the crime of looking at jewelry in a jewelry store." I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding," Mr. Patterson said, his tone suggesting he believed no such thing. "Ms. Chen was simply being cautious. We've had some incidents recently, and our staff is trained to be vigilant." The explanation hung in the air between them, paper thin and transparent. Maya felt the rage building now, a hot pressure behind her ribs. Vigilant. That was the word they used. Not racist, not prejudiced. Vigilant. Vigilant about what, exactly? Maya asked, her calm beginning to fracture. What was suspicious about my behavior? Was it the way I was standing, the way I was dressed, or was it just the way I look? "Ma'am, I don't think anyone was making assumptions based on—" "Don't!" Maya cut him off, her voice sharp enough to make him blink. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is about anything other than what it is." She reached into her handbag, a Bottega Veneta that she'd bought last year in Milan, though she doubted anyone here would notice or care, and retrieved her wallet. Mr. Patterson's body language shifted slightly, a subtle tensing that might have been imperceptible to someone who wasn't watching for it. Even now, the simple act of her reaching into her bag registered as potential threat. From her wallet, Maya withdrew a black credit card. Not black in color, but black card. The American Express Centurion, the kind that required an annual fee higher than many people's car payments. She placed it on the counter with deliberate precision. Then she pulled out a second card. This one's simpler. A platinum card from a different bank, but equally significant in its weight and privileges. Finally, she unfolded a document she'd been carrying. A letter on heavy cream stock with an embossed letterhead. She set it beside the cards, creating a small display of her own. "Actually," Maya said, her voice now perfectly level, emotionless in a way that made every word land like a hammer. "There is no misunderstanding at all. I was looking at my own property, Mr." Patterson picked up the letter, his professionally pleasant expression faltering as he began to read. Maya watched the color drain from his face, the progression of emotions as understanding set in. Confusion, disbelief, recognition, horror. "This is the documentation confirming the transfer of controlling shares in Brilliance & Co. Following my grandmother Elizabeth Henderson's passing last month," Maya said, her tone now clinical, businesslike. "I am now the majority stakeholder of this company, 73% ownership, which makes me, effectively, your boss." The silence that descended on the store was absolute. Even the classical music seemed to have stopped, though that might have been Maya's imagination. She could see Stephanie's face from the corner of her eye, watching the younger woman's certainty crumble into something like panic. "Ms. Henderson, Mr. Patterson's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I had no idea you would be visiting today. We weren't informed." "No," Maya agreed. "You weren't. I wanted to see how my grandmother's stores were being run, how customers were being treated, what kind of environment she'd created in her absence." She paused, letting the implications settle. "I wanted to see it honestly, without the performance that happens when corporate visits are announced." She gestured at the space around them, at Stephanie still frozen near the display case, at Marcus the security guard, at the other customers who were no longer even pretending not to listen. "And now I've seen it." Mr. Patterson set the letter down with trembling hands. "Ms. Henderson, please. This was an unfortunate incident, but I assure you it doesn't reflect our normal standards of—" "Stop." Maya held up one hand. "Just stop talking for a moment." She turned, making eye contact with each person in the store. The elderly couple by the front, now looking uncomfortable. The young woman with the pink hair, still recording. The businessman who had turned away earlier. And finally, Stephanie. "Do you know what hurts most?" Maya asked, her voice quiet now, but somehow carrying through the entire space. "It's not the yelling. It's not even the assumption that I was here to steal. It's how normal it seemed to all of you." She let that sit for a moment, watching people's faces. Not one person questioned it. Not one person asked if maybe, possibly, there might be another explanation. You all just accepted it. Accepted that someone who looks like me doesn't belong in a place like this. Accepted that shouting at me was a reasonable response to my existence in this space. The young woman with the pink hair had lowered her phone. Tears were sliding down her cheeks. The elderly couple stood frozen, their faces masks of shame. Even the businessman had turned back around, unable to meet her eyes. Maya picked up the emerald ring from the display case. No one moved to stop her this time. She held it up to the light, examining it with the trained eye she'd developed over years of learning about her grandmother's business. Years of preparing for this inheritance that she'd never wanted. Not at this cost. "This is beautiful work," she said softly. "My grandmother had excellent taste. She built this company from nothing, you know. Started with a small shop in Atlanta in 1968, right after the Fair Housing Act passed. She told me she chose jewelry because it was one of the few businesses where her race wouldn't automatically disqualify her in people's minds. Precious stones and metals had objective value, she said. You couldn't argue about the worth of a diamond the way you could argue about the worth of a person." Maya slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her. She was wrong, of course. People always find a way to argue about worth. They just dress it up differently. She turned back to Mr. Patterson. "I want a written apology. Not to me personally. I don't need that. I want a public apology posted in this store and on the company's social media accounts, acknowledging what happened here today and committing to do better." "Of course, Ms. Henderson. Absolutely. and I can assure you that appropriate disciplinary action will be— No, Maya interrupted. I'm not done. She looked at Stephanie, who had sunk into a chair near the wall, her face blotchy with tears. Maya felt no satisfaction in the woman's distress, only a bone-deep weariness. Ms. Chen will complete comprehensive anti-bias training, not the 1-hour online module that most companies use to check a box. Real training, intensive and ongoing, with a qualified facilitator who specializes in addressing racial prejudice in retail environments. She'll also write a personal reflection on what happened here and what she learned from it. I'll make sure it happens, Mr. Patterson said quickly. Additionally, she'll be mentoring with Marcus here. Maya nodded toward the security guard, who looked surprised to be included in this conversation. Marcus has worked in this store for how long? 15 years, ma'am, Marcus said quietly. 15 years, Maya repeated. I'm guessing in that time you've developed a pretty good sense of who actually belongs in a store like this, of how to tell the difference between suspicious behavior and shopping while black. Marcus's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. Yes, ma'am. I have learned some things about that. Good. You'll help teach those lessons. Maya looked back at Mr. Patterson. And you'll be reviewing your hiring practices and training protocols with me personally. I want to see the demographics of your staff at every level. Sales associates, management, corporate. I want to see your incident reports for the past 5 years. I want to understand if what happened today was an isolated incident or a symptom of a larger pattern. I'll have everything prepared for you by the end of the week, Mr. Patterson assured her. You'll have it for me tomorrow, Maya corrected, because this is now my priority. Not profits, not expansion, not the new line we were planning to launch. This, making sure that what happened to me today never happens to anyone else in one of my stores. She removed the emerald ring from her finger and placed it carefully back in the display case. I won't be purchasing this today. I don't want my first acquisition from my own company to be tainted by these circumstances. Maya gathered her cards and the ownership documents, sliding them back into her wallet with practiced movements. She took a moment to smooth her blouse, to adjust the strand of pearls at her throat. Her grandmother's pearls, worn today like a talisman. I'll be visiting our other locations over the next few weeks, she said, unannounced as I did today, and I'll be making changes based on what I find. If you value your positions in this company, I suggest you start examining very carefully how you treat customers who don't look like they belong according to your assumptions. She walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Marcus moved to open it for her, and she paused to look at him. Thank you for your years of service, she said quietly. I'll be in touch. I think we should talk about what you've observed over your time here. I'd welcome that conversation, Miss Henderson, Marcus replied. As she stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, Maya heard the door close behind her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had just happened settling onto her shoulders alongside the weight of her new responsibilities. She'd inherited more than a business from her grandmother. She'd inherited the work of creating spaces where dignity wasn't conditional on appearance, where respect wasn't rationed based on assumptions, where a black woman could admire jewelry without being presumed a thief. It was exhausting work. Work she'd watched her grandmother do for decades. Work that never seemed to end, that had to be done and redone and done again, generation after generation. Maya pulled out her phone and called her lawyer. Jonathan, it's Maya. I need you to start preparing briefing materials for the board. We're going to be making some significant changes to company policy. As she spoke, she started walking down the street, leaving Brilliance & Co. behind her. Inside that store, she knew, people were beginning to breathe again, to process what had happened, to grapple with their complicity and their shame. She hoped they sat with that discomfort. She hoped it changed them, but she wasn't naive enough to believe it would. What would change things, she thought as she hailed a taxi, was policy, structure, accountability. Not individual guilt, but systemic transformation. Her grandmother had built an empire. Now Maya would reshape it. The work was just beginning. That evening, Maya sat in her grandmother's study. Her study now, she supposed, though she still couldn't think of it that way. The room smelled like lemon oil and old books, exactly as it always had. Elizabeth Henderson's presence still saturated every surface, from the photographs on the walls to the carefully organized files in the mahogany desk. Maya had pulled out the original business plan her grandmother had written in 1968. The pages yellowed with age, but the handwriting still clear and firm. Elizabeth had written about creating a space of beauty and dignity for all people, about believing that luxury should be accessible to those who appreciated it, regardless of their background. But somewhere between intention and execution, Maya thought, those principles had gotten lost, or perhaps they'd never been fully realized. Her grandmother had been a visionary, but she'd also been pragmatic. She'd made compromises to succeed in a world that didn't want to make room for black women entrepreneurs. Some of those compromises, Maya was beginning to understand, had come at a cost. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The incident at the store was already making its way through social media. The young woman with the pink hair had indeed been recording, and her video was being shared widely. Brilliance & Co. was trending, and not in a good way. Maya's PR team was probably panicking. Her phone would be ringing soon with requests for statements, damage control strategies, spin options. But Maya wasn't interested in spin. She was interested in truth. She opened her laptop and began to type. Today I visited one of my stores for the first time as its owner. I was yelled at, accused of attempting to steal, and treated as a threat. Not because of anything I did, but because of who I am. This is not an isolated incident. This is not an unfortunate misunderstanding. This is a pattern that exists not just in my stores, but across the retail industry and society at large. I am fortunate enough to have the resources and position to demand change. Most people who experience this kind of treatment don't have that privilege. They simply have to endure it, to carry the weight of other people's prejudice without recourse or acknowledgement. I am committing today to transforming Brilliance & Co. into a company that actually lives up to its founder's vision, a space where all people are treated with dignity and respect. This will not be quick or easy. It will require fundamental changes to how we hire, train, and evaluate our staff. It will require honest examination of our policies and practices. It will require listening to voices that have been ignored. Most importantly, it will require acknowledging that what happened to me today was wrong, and that our collective silence in the face of such wrongness makes us all complicit. I invite our customers, our employees, and our community to hold us accountable to this commitment. Change only happens when we are willing to be uncomfortable, to sit with our failures, and to do the hard work of becoming better. Maya read over what she'd written, made a few small edits, and then sent it to her PR team with a note. This goes out tomorrow morning on all our platforms. No edits unless they're for grammar. This is non-negotiable. She closed her laptop and looked around her grandmother's study. On the wall was a photograph of Elizabeth Henderson at the opening of her first store, standing in front of a small shop with a hand-painted sign. She was young in the photo, barely 30, but her eyes held the same determined fire that Maya remembered from her childhood. I hope I'm doing this right, Grandma, Maya whispered to the photograph. I hope this is what you would have wanted. But even as she said it, she knew that it didn't matter what her grandmother would have wanted. This was Maya's company now, her responsibility, her chance to build something better. She thought about Stephanie Chen, about Marcos the security guard, about Mr. Patterson and all the other people who worked in the company's stores. She thought about the customers who walked through those doors every day, and how their experiences were shaped by assumptions and biases that operated beneath the surface of polite interaction. The work ahead was enormous, but it was work worth doing. Maya stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights spreading below. Somewhere out there were dozens of Brilliance & Co. locations, each one a small ecosystem of power dynamics and human interaction. Each one a place where dignity could be honored or violated in the space of a moment. She would visit them all. She would listen. She would learn. And she would change what needed to be changed, no matter how uncomfortable it made people. Because comfort, Maya had learned, was overrated. Justice was worth the discomfort. Her phone rang. Her PR director, as predicted. Maya let it go to voicemail. They would talk tomorrow after her statement went out. After she'd set the course and made it clear that there would be no backing down. For now, she just stood at the window, feeling the weight of inheritance, Not just of a business, but of a legacy, a responsibility, a chance to do something that mattered. The emerald ring would still be there tomorrow, waiting in its case. Someday, when the memory of today's humiliation had faded enough, maybe she would go back and try it on again. Maybe she would wear it as a reminder of this moment, of the day everything changed. But not yet. For now, she had work to do. The transformation was just beginning.